All right, guys, welcome to lesson 3 of this IELTS speaking course. Okay, my name is Ben, and I'm going to be your instructor today. Today we are covering part 2, and part 2 we also discussed in lesson 2, okay, the previous lesson, but we discussed a very basic strategy for how to use the prompt in part 2, on the topic card, how to use that prompt, those bullet points, to structure your answer. In this lesson, we're going to cover the 5 points strategy, which should allow you to focus on your skills a little bit more than your fluency. Okay, and by skills I mean your vocabulary and your grammar. Now, let's discuss part 1 just very briefly. The 3 things that I really want you to remember from our first lesson. First of all, focus on fluency. All right, parts 2 and parts 3, you have plenty of time to show off your vocabulary knowledge and your ability to use complex grammar. Okay, in part 1, what you want to show off is your ability to speak smoothly and naturally. Okay, so don't hesitate too much thinking of that special word or fancy vocabulary word. Really just focus on being natural, answering quickly, and answering smoothly. Okay? The second thing I want you to remember is the strategy that we studied. Okay? 1 plus 1. So answer short and then expand. Okay, so if they ask you, what is your favorite food? You say, my favorite food is pizza. That's 1. And then add 1 more. Especially, I love pepperoni pizza, even though some people think that it is too salty. I love it. That's your plus 1. Okay, 1, I love pizza, plus 1, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so for every answer, you can use that rubric or that strategy to help you answer naturally and quickly. Third, the one thing that I mentioned in the lesson 1, or in lesson 2, it came up as well, is to complain. Okay? One of the most natural things for us to do as humans is to complain. Okay? To talk about things that bother us or things that annoy us. So use that kind of natural tendency to your advantage. Okay, it's going to happen naturally anyway. So as you start to explain the thing that bothers you, you're going to sound really natural and comfortable. Okay, too many of my students just only speak about positive things. They are so happy and their life is so good and everything is great and their country is wonderful. No, talk about bad things. Okay, that's what we do as humans, all right? Now, part 2, this is something that we covered in the previous lesson, okay? We talked about the 4 corners strategy. I just want to quickly review it, okay? So the 4 corners, each prompt is going to give you 4 aspects to explain. This is to help you structure your answer. And you can use that to put your notes in order. Okay? So this is a strategy for developing your ideas on the paper. Okay? Here you had when, where, who, and why. When, where, who, and why. Okay? You can use the topic card they give you to help you organize your ideas. That was our first strategy. That's what we practiced in the last lesson. Key information that you need to remember about part 2 as we get into this new strategy. First of all, you cannot change your topic card, so do not ask the examiner for that. Okay, I've had a few students who have done this to me and said, oh, sorry, I don't know about this topic. Can you give me a new one? No, I can't. There's no possibility for that. Second, don't be afraid to glance at your notes. Okay? We practice that in sort of the simulated exams, right? That's why you have the video of my face on there so that you can keep eye contact with me, okay, but glance down at your notes periodically, okay? Eye contact is something you really need to practice, okay? This is something that a lot of students, when they just study alone at home, that's why it's so different in the real exam. You have a real person there. The examiner is sitting right across from you. The examiner is expecting you to communicate with them, not just speak looking at the paper, okay? So at the beginning, I understand you have a tendency to use your notes almost too much, okay? But as you develop your strategies, as you become more comfortable, start working on making better eye contact with the examiner, okay? Very important. Next, you are scored on language use and not content, okay? So remember, it's okay for your answers to be boring as long as you have interesting language, okay? Often, interesting answers lead to interesting language, but it doesn't have to be. So you don't have to make an interesting answer, okay? Doesn't matter. Fourth, don't be afraid to wander a little off the topic. Okay, you're going to see today, in today's strategy, that we're going to wander pretty far from the topic, as mentioned. Okay, we're going to use the initial topic, but we're going to ignore pretty much everything else. Okay, so don't be afraid to wander around a little bit. That's how we naturally speak. It's okay. Try to speak for the full 2 minutes. Okay, the examiner will tell you that you can speak from 1 to 2 minutes. Okay, but speaking for a full 2 minutes is the best chance you have of getting a higher score. Show off your grammar, show off your vocabulary. And finally, you do not have to follow the bullet points. Okay, what do I mean by bullet points? Bullet points are, if we look back here, these 4 things. 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are the bullet points that I'm talking about. You do not have to follow those bullet points. Okay? And that is really what our 5 points strategy is based on. You do not have to follow the bullet points. Okay? So our 4 corners strategy was all based on the 4 bullet points. Right? The strategy for today is going to ignore the bullet points completely. We're not even going to look at them. Okay, so here's how it works. Let's get into our 5-point strategy. Ignore the bullet points. Feels scary, but it's actually really nice. A lot of the students that I've taught over the years, they really enjoyed this strategy much more than the 4 corners. Some people like the 4 corners, but I think this strategy is better. Here's how it works. So we're going to look at the same topic card. Okay. Again, we have initial sentence or initial instructions that say describe a sporting event you watched or took part in. And then there are the bullet points, right? So we're going to ignore these completely. All right. And we're left with just this. Then we have our topic, right? Our topic is a sporting event. Now let's get into the actual 5 points that I'm talking about with this strategy. Okay, and here they are: intro, experience, detail, opinion, and hope. Okay, these are the 5 points that I want you to hit with your part 2. Okay, one by one. All right, so let's take a look at how that works. Okay, so you're going to write keywords for each point. Remember, our topic was the sporting event, right? Okay, so here's my intro. This was the sporting event that I went to, Seattle Sounders, and I went with my dad and my brother. Okay, here we're just describing the event in general. Okay, that's the intro. The experience. Okay, here you're talking about something from the past. Okay, so I want to describe the sporting event. Okay, in this case, it's pretty obvious. It is a past event. Okay, So this is probably going to be the main part of my answer, is describing the experience of the event. Okay, so I'm going to take down keywords that are a little bit advanced, okay, words that will show off my ability to use vocabulary. Okay, atmosphere, competition, rivalry. Okay, all those three words will help me get a higher score, a higher band score. Detail. Okay, here's where you're going to pick one element and describe it in specific detail. Okay, so among this whole event, I'm going to describe the stadium. Okay, so I'm going to say something like, oh, let me tell you a little bit about the stadium itself. And then I want to write down a few key words, especially adjectives. Okay, expansive, okay, booming, this just means loud, big, right? And roar, I know that's a noun, but I thought it would be useful as well. So the roar of the crowd, the kind of booming sounds of the spectators. And then an opinion. Okay? So our opinion here is going to be about soccer. Okay? The Seattle Sounders is a soccer team. This event was a soccer game. All right? So I want to describe my opinion about soccer in general. Okay? Strategic, right? Patient, and euphoria is a word that I want to use. So my idea here is that a soccer game is more strategic than other sports, right? You have to be really patient as an observer and sense the kind of tension and momentum of the game. And because of that, when a goal is scored, you get this sense of extreme euphoria compared to other sports where there's a lot of different, like basketball, there's a point scored every minute, okay? Each point is not that exciting. But with soccer, each goal is really exciting. Okay, so those are the key words that I'm going to use when describing my opinion of soccer. And then finally, hope. This is about the future. Hope or a plan for the future. Okay, a prediction maybe. Right? In this case, I went to the game with my dad and my brother. So my hope is that we will continue to find these bonding moments as a family to develop our relationship. And also, I saw one game in the stadium. Now I want to see some televised games so that I can become a better fan of that team. All right? So you can see here I've got a lot to talk about, and it has nothing to do with the bullet points. These are all my own ideas here. Okay? So that's one benefit, is that this is everything that I want to talk about. I chose what to talk about. Okay? All right. So that's the strategy in a nutshell. But there's more to it than that. Okay? And that's when we get into the reason why this strategy is so valuable. Because we focus on skills. Each skill, or each point, there are 5 points, and each one of those focuses on a skill, except for the intro. Okay, the intro doesn't really focus on a skill. We just have 1 or 2 sentences to set up the idea. So here's my intro. I would like to tell you about my experience watching a Seattle Sounders game. I saw the game a few weeks ago with my brother, my father, and my brother-in-law. Okay, just a very quick, simple introduction. Now the experience point, here's where we're going to show off our use of past tenses. Okay, past tenses. Tenses plural, okay? So not just the simple past, but also past continuous, and if possible, past perfect. So if you're a grammar nerd like me, and you know these kind of advanced grammar techniques, or advanced grammar points, this is your chance to use them, okay? So let's look at my example. The game took place at a stadium in downtown Seattle. Okay, there's my simple past. Before this game, I had never seen a professional sporting event in my life. Okay. Before the game, I had never seen. That is past perfect. Okay? So if you can find a way to work in the past perfect, as an examiner, I'm always really impressed when I can hear past perfect used correctly. It's really rare, and so that makes me really impressed when I hear it. I remember thinking that when the first goal was scored, I was taking a drink of beer and I spilled it all over myself. I was taking a drink of beer. So notice how I set these up. Here I've got before the game. Okay, so I start with the game, and that lets me link to past perfect. Okay, so you want to start with the actual event, and then think before that event. Had never seen. And then pick a moment within the event, okay, when the first goal was scored, at that moment, okay. To use past continuous, you need a moment, okay, not just a general event, you need a moment. When the first goal was scored, I was drinking, or I was taking a drink of beer, okay. That's how you can use past continuous in a really natural and authentic way. Okay, pick a specific moment. Okay, the more you practice that, the more natural it will become. Now, adjectives. So when we talk about the detail, remember I was going to mention the about the stadium. Okay, what it looked like. So here's where you can show off your adjective use. The stadium was extremely expansive, much more so than I expected. The crowd was massive, and I enjoyed the booming sound of the cheering fans. Okay, so expansive, massive, booming, those are all high-level adjectives, which show off my vocabulary knowledge. That's the point of the detail. Show off your vocabulary. Opinion. The fourth point. There's two things you can show here. First, your ability to use opinion expressions. Okay, stuff like I strongly believe, I firmly believe, as far as I'm concerned, like that. And then also comparatives. Okay, bigger than, smaller than. Okay, that's a grammar that as an examiner, I'm always listening for. Are they using comparatives correctly? Okay, so take a look at this one. As far as I'm concerned, soccer is a much more enjoyable game than other sports, even though in America, baseball, basketball, and football are more popular. Okay, so I'm comparing soccer to other sports. The way I see it, soccer is more dramatic since there are fewer goals. The tension creates a more electric atmosphere. More dramatic, fewer, more electric. Okay? I'm actually using some good adjectives here as well. All right, so the opinion area, focus on those skills. Opinion expressions, comparatives, and possibly some advanced adjectives. And finally, hope. Your future idea here. You're going to use future tenses, including simple, continuous, and perfect, just like the past. Okay? If possible, show off your advanced grammar. In the future, I plan to see many more games. That is a simple future idea. I hope to see, I plan to see, I will see, I am going to see. All of those are simple future. Whenever I go back to Seattle, I'll be looking for opportunities to buy tickets. Okay? I will be looking. That's that's future continuous. Will be plus verb ing. And then notice this one, by the time. Okay? By the time I return to Seattle, I plan to have learned all the players' names. Now this is advanced, okay? So if you have not learned this, or if you're not comfortable with this grammar, don't worry about it. But if you have high-level grammar, use it here, okay? Use an expression like by the time. Okay? By the time I am 50 years old, I will have gotten married. By the time I finish my my master's degree, I will have gotten a job. Okay? Something like that. I plan to have learned. Will have learned. Plan to have learned. Hope to have learned. All right. Again, that's pretty advanced, but at least stick to good, simple future tenses. Use these if you are able to use them. Okay? So those are the skills. There are a couple of advantages to using the 5 points strategy compared to the 4 corner strategy. First, there's more focus on vocabulary and grammar rather than fluency. So in part 1, we hit fluency pretty hard. Okay? Part 2, you should be able to show off vocabulary and grammar. This is a more direct way to do that. Second, it can be used with any topic card. Okay? Any topic card, just ignore the bullet points, use the 5 points. Okay? Sounds like it wouldn't work, but I'll show you examples. It works with every card. Third, it's good for less familiar topics. Okay? So if you get a topic, a lot of times in part 2, it seems like just good or bad luck. Sometimes you get a topic that you don't really know how to talk about. Okay? And we end up, I see a lot of students just bomb part 2 because they are not familiar with the topic they're given. Okay? So this allows you to talk about what you want to talk about related to the topic, instead of being stuck with the bullet points. And fourth, it gives you more consistent practice. Okay? What I mean by that is that with any topic, you're doing the same process. Point 1, point 2, point 3, point 4, point 5. Practice again. Point 1, point 2. With a new topic, still you've got the same 5 points. With the 4 corners method, each time your bullet points are changing. Maybe it's who, when, why, and where. Or maybe it's what kind of, and why, and how much, and when. Okay, it changes every time. With this, it's the same 5 points every time. So that can be good. Alrighty, so let's take a look at an example here. Here is our topic card. Describe the home you would most like to own in the future. You should say where it would be located, how you would redecorate it, how many rooms you would need, and explain why you want to own a home like this. Alright, well, let's just get rid of that. Now, all we've got here is our topic, okay? A home you would like to own. A home you would like to own. Now, I noticed something right away, and that is that the future is going to be possibly the biggest part of our answer here, okay? Because this is asking us something about the future, okay? But it doesn't have to be the whole thing. I still recommend going through these 5 steps, just spending a little less time on these 4, and possibly a full minute on this hope part. Okay? But let's go through the whole thing here. Let's see, my home. Now, if I'm going to explain my past experience, okay, and my opinion, I think I'm going to need to set it up in some way. So, in my intro, I think I'm going to say that it's based on my previous experiences. Okay? Of course, everybody forms their opinion about their home based on what homes they lived in or what homes they visited. Okay? So I think I'll set that up in my introduction, And that way it doesn't sound strange when I mention my experience next. And I lived in many homes. Okay, so that'll be my introduction, basically. All right, experience. Let's see here. So growing up, we can start with that. Something in the past. Let's see, my home was rural, spacious. My room was in the basement. I had a yard. Okay. I like to add something with by the time. Okay, so by the time I moved to Korea. Okay, so I moved to Korea 5 years ago, right? By the time I moved there, okay, by the time is a great way to set up past perfect. Okay, had lived 20 places. Okay, I moved a lot. When I was young and after college, I moved like once a year, probably. So I lived in a lot of different homes. Okay, but that's the key here, had lived. I'm preparing to use past perfect. Now the detail, let's describe my home now. Okay, where I live now. I'm actually at home right now, so it helps me prepare, but it is cramped, okay, very small. But remember here, I'm looking for interesting adjectives to use. Okay, it's cramped, a bit claustrophobic. Do you know what this means? Similar to cramped. And then bare. Okay, meaning there's nothing really on the walls. It seems pretty empty. Okay, so those are my adjectives that I'm going to try to hit in my detail part. Remember, we don't need too much for this because most of our answer is going to be in the hope part. Now, opinion. What is my opinion about homes? I prefer bigger homes. So here I want to set up my comparative, okay, comparative adjectives. And of course I want to use my opinion phrase. But my opinion is basically, you need a space to express yourself, I think. And so I'm going to say that it's more creative and maybe more dynamic, okay? Allows you to be more dynamic and more creative. So that's my comparative work right there. And then hope. What do I hope in the future? Like a large house, I think in a small town. Room for my hobbies. Okay, and I can give some examples there. I want to set up something with the future perfect. So I'm going to again use my by the time. So by the time, let's set myself a goal. By the time I'm 40 years old, I will have gotten married and will have, let's use continuous, will be living in a house that I own. Okay? So this allows me to use both of these grammar tenses, present perfect and present continuous. Okay? So that's what we want to do in, much more quickly when you're in the actual exam. You have 1 minute to set this up. Okay? So you can see what I did. I picked one spot to start with, one spot to really focus on. But I want to hit, I want to hit each of these points as well. Okay? This will make sure that you can talk for 2 minutes if you can get through all 5 of these points. Okay? So let's give a little example here. I will give my 2-minute answer to this question. I would like to tell you about the home that I imagine for my future. A lot of this is based on my previous experience because I've lived in a lot of different homes in my life. So growing up, I lived in a rural area. So the home that I lived in was very spacious. I lived in the basement. That's where my room was. Very big area to grow up in. And we also had a yard outside, so I could play a lot of games with my friends. And by the time I moved to Korea, I had actually lived in 20 places already. So I had a lot of different experiences in different homes. The home that I live in now, let me tell you a little bit about that. It is very cramped, very claustrophobic, and it feels very bare. I haven't really personalized it in any way, partly because I'm renting it. In my opinion, it's better to have more space to express yourself in. Having more space allows you to be more creative and more dynamic as well. And I think allows your personality to develop a little bit better. So I hope that in the future I can live in a large house. That probably means I would need to live in a small town. Maybe not in a rural area, but at least a smaller city that would allow me to buy a home, a big home that's not too expensive. The most important thing for me is to have room for my hobbies. I'm the kind of person who changes hobbies regularly, so I would like to have room to do painting or to do music. By the time I am 40 years old, I hope to have gotten married, and I hopefully will be living in a house that I own. Okay, there was my 2-minute answer. So notice all of that vocabulary that I was able to use, and I managed to use these advanced grammar expressions as well. Okay. Okay, so let's take a look at my own notes for this. All right, I'm going to talk about my friend Megan, who knows the Korean language very well. All right, that's my introduction. Now the experience, I'm going to talk about when we first met. Okay, so we met about 2 years ago. Now by doing that first, okay, so I'm going to say something like, I met Megan 2 years ago. I set that as the kind of reference point in time. Okay? Because I did that, I can use this expression at that time, and then I can use past perfect. She had become fluent because she had visited Korea as a student before I met her. Okay, so I set the time in the past, and then I talk about what happened before that time. She became fluent before we met. So I'm going to mention the meeting first, and that gives me a reason to use past perfect. Okay? For the detail, I'm going to describe her skill. Okay? And I use all of these adjectives to describe what kind of skills she has in the Korean language. The opinion is that her approach is good. Okay, so I like her approach to learning. And these are my comparatives. It's more social, more authentic, and more enjoyable. So again, a little bit of grammar use there, and also a couple of good adjective uses as well. And then my hope is that I can learn Korean as well as her. Okay. Again, here I am setting up. I should probably change this to woman. I'm setting up here a reference point. Okay? I might marry a Korean woman. That's my point in the future. Before I marry a Korean woman, by that time, I'm setting up past perfect, I'm setting up future perfect here. I hope to have learned Korean so that I can talk with her parents. And I will be taking a Korean class next year. All right, that's my future continuous. So I think this topic doesn't really require us to focus on one of these points. We can focus on all of them sort of equally. Or your introduction will be pretty short, but these 4 points, I can focus on them for around 30 seconds each or 25 seconds each. Okay? So let's hear how it goes. I'll give you my 2-minute answer for this question. You ready? I would like to talk to you about my friend Megan. She knows Korean language very well, and so that's the person that I will share with you today. We met around 2 years ago, and we met because she joined my company. And at that time when we met, she had already become fluent in Korean. That's because she had visited Korea as a student prior to my meeting her. At the time when she visited, she made a lot of Korean friends, and I think that's the reason she was able to learn Korean so well, is she learned by communicating with them. Now, her skills are good, but in a specific way. She is very fluent. Okay? Her fluency is definitely better than her vocabulary or her grammar, but her fluency allows her to be very flexible when it comes to social situations. And she also has a fairly expansive vocabulary. She's really comfortable talking to all kinds of different people in Korean, and she has a really precise pronunciation. So she's often complimented by Koreans on her pronunciation. In my opinion, her approach to learning a language is really good. It allows for more social use of language. Also, the language that she learned is more authentic, I think, than the language that you would learn in a textbook. And it's also more enjoyable. I hope that in the future I can learn Korean as well as her. Someday I might marry a Korean woman, so by that time I hope to have learned Korean pretty well so that I can speak with her parents. Next year I will be taking a Korean class, actually, the same one that Megan took, so hopefully I can learn as well as her. All right, and that was 2 minutes. So you can see how smoothly all these pieces connect, much more so than the previous one. All right, so here's our new topic. Tell me about something that you borrowed recently. Remember, we're getting rid of all this. And you can take a look at what I did from my notes here. So the introduction, I'm talking about a bicycle that I borrowed from my friend. Okay, and my experience was my bike ride. I took a bike ride around my town, and when I arrived home, that's me setting it up, it had been 2 hours, or 2 hours had passed. Okay, so I'm setting up the time, and then I'm describing what had happened before that time. Okay, I did one more thing here as well. I set up a moment. Okay, I had an accident. That's the moment. And then I can use past continuous, right, to describe what I was doing at that moment. Now, this is not even true. I didn't have an accident, but I saw it as a chance to use past continuous, so I put it in there. My detail is about the bicycle, and I'm going to use these adjectives: old-fashioned, clunky, which means kind of heavy and awkward, rusty, and the paint is faded. Okay, so notice those good adjectives I'm using there, showing off my knowledge. My opinion is that it's a great way to get around. Okay, and here are my my comparisons: more convenient, more inexpensive, or less expensive. It's more responsible for the environment. There's no pollution, and it's also healthier for you than taking a car or a bus. And here's my hope: to buy my own bicycle soon. And notice, by this time next month, there's my setup. I will have saved enough money. Okay, will have saved or I hope to have saved enough money. And soon I will be riding, future continuous, my own bike all over town. Okay? Actually, I don't think hope is really going to be key here. If anything, the experience might be the thing that we want to focus on most, but really all of these should be relevant to the story. Okay? So, let's check out my 2-minute answer to this question. Here we go. I would like to tell you about a bicycle that I recently borrowed from my friend. I borrowed the bicycle so that I could take a bike ride around my town. I've been considering buying my own bike, so I wanted to see what it would be like just for one day to get around by bicycle, as opposed to a car or a taxi or a bus. And I was surprised by how much I enjoyed it. Actually, I wasn't really checking the time, but when I arrived home, it had already been 2 hours since I left. So the time really flew by. The one problem was that I had an accident. It's my own fault because I was texting while riding. So I probably should have seen that coming. The bicycle itself was kind of old-fashioned. If I had a choice, I would probably prefer a more modern bike. It was also pretty clunky and rusty as well. The appearance was not good. The paint was all faded. Yeah, I would prefer a different bike next time. In my opinion, riding a bicycle is a really good way to get around town. It's more convenient, it's less expensive. It's also more responsible for the environment, since you're not creating any pollution when you ride a bike. And finally, it's also healthier for you, since you are getting a little bit of a workout when you ride. So I hope I can buy my own bicycle really soon. I'm saving money now, so I hope that by this time next month, I will have saved enough money to buy my bike. And then very soon, I will be riding my own bike all over town instead of always borrowing my friends. Okay, and that's my 2-minute answer. Not bad, right? Sounds very connected. Sounds totally natural to mention all of these things. All right? And that is pretty much it for this lesson, okay? So just to remind you, there are some big advantages to using the 5 points method. Okay? You can focus more on vocabulary and grammar, as you saw. Past perfect, past continuous, future perfect, future continuous, adjective use, comparatives. Okay? A lot of chances to show off your skills. You can use that method with any topic card. Okay? As you saw, we chose 3, maybe 4 examples today. They were all quite different from each other, and all of them worked fine with this method. It's really good for less familiar topics. Okay, so something like the sporting event, for example. If you can't really think of much for the sporting event, this is a good method to use because you can adapt it to something that you do know about. And then finally, really good for more consistent practice. If you practice the 5 points method again and again and again and again, when you get into the exam, you're going to be really well prepared, and even the most strange and unusual topic is not going to be a problem for you. Okay? So that concludes this lesson. Please join me for the next lesson when we move into part 3. But for now, goodbye.